Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tim May along with
Bill Rabinowitz.
And Bill. We're here from the Woody Hayes Athletic Center deposition corner. Just joking. That press conference did feel like a little bit like a deposition. Maybe one of the second or third ones Urban Meyer's done. When it comes to the situation that got him put on suspension for 3 games, actually a month of not even being around the football program, and then the last 2 games he's had to miss, along with the opener, suspended from the game action. But you've been reporting on this since this thing first started. I have to a certain extent. But what was your takeaway in general from our press conference with Urban Meyer?
Well, it lasted 55 minutes, which I'm sure is a record for him.
But nobody cares about the time. Go ahead.
No, but just that he answered, every question that came his way. He reiterated again he has never condoned domestic violence. That's not why he got suspended. He said he got suspended for basically mishandling what he said in Chicago, and in not dealing with Zach Smith's problems earlier, not firing him earlier.
More so for that
than how he handled,
as he called them, his work-related issues.
Right. And he said he relied on law enforcement with that. And he said, okay, that was probably my mistake. I probably should have asked more questions. But, he said he did not. I thought he was candid. I thought he was honest. When he got a question about, somebody said something about his shattered reputation nationally, you could tell that stung him. I think he went in there thinking today, I'm going to answer every question and put this behind us.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure it ever gets totally behind him, but you can flip the mirrors, your rearview mirrors, and look at something else. This will stick with him forever in some sense, some form or fashion, and only time heals these kind of things one way or the other. The interesting thing was his story. I mean, his line has never changed, though, about why he said what he said in Chicago, which was he was reacting to a story as it had been portrayed to him the night before, that Zach Smith had been arrested and charged with domestic violence situation, a felony domestic violence situation involving his then wife, Courtney Smith, back in 2015. And of course, you and I both, we searched everything we could find for any kind of like official notice of a charge and an arrest. Did not find it back then. The reason was because he was never arrested and he was never charged. And of course, the young man who wrote that story sort of changed it as it went along. But that's what got legs, and that's what everybody thought Urban Meyer was responding to in Chicago when he responded the way he did. That there was nothing, meaning he was responding specifically to the idea that a guy had been arrested and charged on his coaching staff, and he did nothing about it. And because I know I was the first guy to ask him a question as he got off the elevator that morning in Chicago, and then he got up in front of the big crowd there in the interview area, and then he also went to the breakout where it seemed like as many reporters were there as were in the interview room. And but what I'm getting to here is, though, that's where this whole thing escalated, in my opinion, sort of out of his control, and he has paid the price for it.
No question. And he has said that somebody asked him today if he thinks if he had responded differently in Chicago, would he have been suspended? He said, no, probably not. I mean, he knows that was the thing that pushed it over the edge. And, he's a guy there are a lot of people in the national media that have taken shots at him for whatever reason, whatever motivations they may have had from years ago or whatever. And they certainly have taken their shots at him. And he's deserved some of them. I mean, he did misspeak in Chicago. Now, he drew a distinction between misspeaking and lying. He said there was never an intent to deceive. He mishandled questions, but it wasn't deliberate like a lie. When you think about somebody lying, it's, I know the truth, this is not the truth, and I'm going to tell you what's not the truth. He said it wasn't that. It was, I didn't handle the questions the way I should have. He also addressed other things that were in the...
Well, wait, let me say, though, but he didn't, I don't think at that point he felt it was within his purview to volunteer information, personal information about an employee who, in fact, had not been arrested or charged. It was not in his, bailiwick to feel compelled to do that. And I'm not making excuses for him, but I know how he thinks to a certain extent, and that's where he went. Now go ahead.
No, I mean, you're right, and he said that there was no intent I wasn't trying to deceive people. It was just, this was a personal matter, a private matter. He had just fired the coach, Zach Smith, the day before. Right. I'm sure there was all kinds of emotion. And of course, as we've talked about many times, the relationship with Zach Smith being Earl Bruce's grandson. And so it's not just an ordinary assistant coach, somebody he's had a long tie to, and he realizes he was very upset. He said the reason he actually fired Zach Smith finally was that he realized that Zach Smith had not been forthcoming to him about the 2 charges that this summer, about the criminal trespass charge and about the domestic violence protection order. And that was the thing that finally said, okay, we have to fire him.
Because clearly, as he has spoken a couple of times, they took serious some of the situations that developed in 2015, and then when Zach Smith's job performance started to slack big time, and he had all kinds of problems, so occasionally showing up late for meetings and things like that. They, as Urban Meyer said, they got him, kind of laid the law down to him, but also got him counseling and things like this, and then it's up to them. But then after that, after the divorce was finalized in 2016, Zach Smith's performance evaluations, whatever you want to call it, his performance, according to Urban Meyer, picked up dramatically. Right. And because he had gotten whatever the problems was there, he'd gotten them off his mind. And as he said, he was dealing with 2 households. I'm talking about Zach was, and trying to support 2 households because he was divorced at that point, but also had 2 children, and his 2 children were around here all the time, even after the divorce. So, and Urban Meyer was trying to, as he said, in essence, I'm paraphrasing here, help a guy out who clearly has had some problems and didn't want to see a family totally disintegrated by it.
Yeah, as hard as Urban Meyer can be on his assistants, he's not a guy who fires coaches. Right. This is the first coach, I believe, that he has actually fired.
He's helped people get other jobs, yes, so to speak. Yes, but
a gentle, golden parachute or whatever. I mean, you may want to pursue this job, sir, but he does not fire people lightly, especially Zach Smith, again, given his background.
Being Earl Bruce's grandson.
Right. And so, he said, Urban Meyer said today, I actually thought we got him through this. I thought that we had gotten him through the, to the other side. And people go through stuff all the time. And his position is, do I fire somebody and sever ties, which means they're on their own, or do I do everything I can do to put into place mechanisms that can help that person get through it? And he has always chosen the latter, and I would think most people would say that's the right thing to do in most cases. In this case, obviously, it did not work.
Following on, I got to ask a couple of questions, and mine were more about, did Urban Meyer see any kind of shakeup coming in his administrative staff based on the other things we learned about Zach Smith's performance problems in the workplace, and et cetera. And he didn't really. I don't think he didn't really answer that. Yeah, he saw some things, big time changes coming. But what I was getting at the root of, Urban Meyer has always sort of had the attitude he wants to hear good news, not bad news. He doesn't like a lot of bad news crossing over his desk. He has dealt, by the way, with domestic violence situations with his players before, and it has meant either instant dismissal or instant suspension, depending on what happened with law enforcement. Obviously, with Briante Dunn, it was instant, you're gone. Right. Carlos Hyde, it was instant, you're gone, but then when the charges never came because of some conflicting situations there, then he had a 3-game suspension. We all know about Storm Klein and his situation. No charges were ever formally brought from the standpoint of how he handled a situation with a girlfriend screaming at him in his apartment one day. But the bottom line is he's always acted quickly in those things. But what I got to is when you find out there were some things going on in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, which is, by the way, but my point is, if you liken this to a cruise ship, he's the captain of the cruise ship, and what goes on in the cruise ship basically drifts up, not down, if you know what I'm saying, from a responsibility standpoint. And he clearly was not aware of some of the things. When he did become aware of them, for example, the strip club visit by Zach Smith, along with another assistant coach, as it was first portrayed, but as we found out was the offensive coordinator then, Tom Herman, back in, I think it was 2014. Do I have the year correct? I think it was. Anyway, it was in that area before Tom Herman left to become the head coach at the University of Houston. As he said, when he found out about that, he basically brought them both in and said, this happens again, you're fired. I mean, there was no, ifs, ands, or buts about that. But those are just things that like popped up during this thing. And of course, he amended his coaching manual to include such kind of dalliances. But there are all these things that he, as you find out, didn't know about, that the investigation uncovered, and now he is, now he does know about them, but now he's responsible in his mind to know more about these kind of things, which was never sort of his approach, from a standpoint of meddling all day, every day, but also, like I said, maybe he had employees who didn't want to bring things to him because that would ruin his day.
Yeah, I think he's probably perceived as more of a bad cop than a good cop when it comes to things like that, and I think that people will try to avoid the bad cop. So, like the issue with his cell phone, the text messages, it said in the report that several people were asked to get his phone and nobody did. Well, why is that? And now that wasn't specifically asked today, but what Meyer did address was the issue of, did he deliberately delete cell phone texts? And his answer was no, he did not. That it was actually because
or did he change the settings so that they would be deleted?
He personally, and his answer was that no, he did not do that. That because of the volume of texts that he sends and receives to recruits, to family, to whoever.
And like he also explained, a lot of the stuff that goes out on his cell phone occasionally is done by IT, by people here, because he isn't necessarily a wizard at loading videos and things like that.
And that maybe, I think he said 2 months before he was told to have the phone preserved so that all the texts were preserved, that the IT person had changed the setting on his phone to automatically delete texts a year old or longer, just because it was overloading the phone.
Probably texts or you would think some things that may go out on his Twitter or things like his Twitter account. I mean, videos and stuff which eat up a lot of space. But yeah, go ahead.
Anyway, so that was one of the big kind of red flags in that report, was why would text messages, and it happened after the Lantern had specifically requested those texts, and we don't have them, they've been deleted. Well, that was Meyer's,
back to 2015.
Right, this was Meyer's explanation for why those, why he didn't have the text. It wasn't his doing. He said he did not delete any text. It was just the IT person reset his phone, reprogrammed his phone to delete those texts automatically.
Yeah. My phone is set on a 1-year thing too, because mine fills up big time.
Many people love you.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I just, well, we know that goes without saying, even though you did say it, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much. But yeah, I mean, he answered those questions, and I don't. Here's the bottom line. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm not stammering. I've just got a lot of thoughts going through my brain, because the bottom line is, and he kind of addressed this too, is that this isn't going to go. People aren't going to forget about this. One press conference, as he found out, a couple of tweets extended tweets where he put out explaining his side of things. People believe finally what they want to believe from this whole situation. That's not going to change. I mean, the narrative out there, right or wrong, good or bad, has long ago been set and drifted out into the ocean. And so, bottom line is, this was just him taking that time to address us for the first time formally since August the 22nd in a press conference situation where he had free reign to ask any question you wanted to ask today. And he did that, and he kind of, he stuck to his story, stuck to the answers that he has been giving, and so I don't know where it goes from here. I mean, from the standpoint of who knows if something else is going to pop up, what we might find later, et cetera. But where do you think it goes from here?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it all depends on what happens. Look, there could be court cases in the future. There could be cases that reveal the truth or evidence in the future. We have to wait for that to play out. As far as Urban Meyer is concerned, he gets to coach against Tulane.
And by those court cases, you're referring also, obviously to the Courtney Smith, Zach Smith situation. There's been a court case that's been kept getting delayed, pushed back, whatever you want to call it, here for the last month and a half. We'll see if that reveals anything. But that will be probably as eye-opening as anything else we've seen in this thing.
Yeah.
Because those people, then you will be under oath.
Yeah, and you know how these things work. There could be other things that happen
Correct.
On the road. And so, what Urban Meyer wanted to do today was answer every question, to be able to say
explain his thinking.
Explain his thinking, go through the timeline, which he did at the beginning, and then be able to say, okay, I've addressed everything that I can address. let's move on, and I'm not going to talk about this anymore unless there's something new that I have to address. I think this was his attempt to clear the record, set the record, and then be able to move on.
Bill, Ohio State plays a football game this week. And at least he didn't go Bill Belichick on us at the end of the press conference on to Tulane, or as I call it, the Tulane Highway this morning in my OSU Insider. You can see it at BuckeyeXtra.com. We didn't have room for it in print for some reason. But bottom line is there is another game to be played, and for the first time, Urban Meyer is going to be on the sideline this season. And somebody asked, is it kind of like a bull in a china shop, him coming back? Well, he came back to work really 2 weeks ago, but now – the bull is now going to be on the sidelines.
Screwed up, Urban.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I said in my OSU Insider this morning. Probably what he should say is keep on keeping on. Yeah. Although, let's face it, as good as the offense looked at times on Saturday night, the defense scored 2 of their touchdowns,
right.
And that was an interesting game because this was no concerto in B flat or E flat. Exactly. I mean, I can read music, but my point is it wasn't just a song that went from this part to that part. This song jumped all over the place. It was like dissonance, from a standpoint of, wait a minute, Ohio State's up 10. Wait a minute, TCU's up 8. Wait a minute, Ohio State's up. What was it? Yeah. Right. Ohio State's what was it? When after the 3 touchdowns, it was 13 or 12. Yeah.
Yeah. That was not a lot of fun. Fortunately, the crazy stuff happened more in the third quarter than the fourth. Thank God for everything, for that. But let's talk about TCU just for a minute here. As you said, it was, that's a big win. TCU was better than I thought they'd be. I thought they'd be very good. They were a notch above that. Very fast. I thought their quarterback played great. Some of those deep throws. I watched the video last night.
That's why a lot of people thought he looked like a little bit like Michael Vick and guys like that.
Ooh, he was great.
Lamar Jackson.
And that defense, Gary Patterson is a hell of a defensive coach.
Yes, he is.
And they game planned Ohio State very well. I thought that Ohio State responded when they had to. I mean, they were down 8 in the second half, and they lost Nick Bosa. And you want to give an update on that in a minute? And they found a way. 3 touchdowns in 4 minutes and 1 second, and depending on what happens the rest of the season, they could look at those 4 minutes and say that's what turned the season around.
Oh, 4 minutes and 1 second from one touchdown to the end. It was actually whatever that possession was leading up to that touchdown, the first touchdown. But the bottom line was, you're sitting there. I mean, you were sitting next to me in the press box, and it's like you're kind of like, are we believing what we're seeing here? No, that 3 touchdown flurry was ridiculous. And of course, as I called it, the pivotal point, the pivotal moment of that 3 touchdown deal was Draymond Jones's interception of the option shovel pass down the line, which I've said all along. I've been covering football for a long time now. I've seen a couple of those on video, but I've never seen one of those live, where I've never understood why that has never been intercepted. He takes it back 28 yards for the touchdown that put him ahead, 26-21, because obviously they'd gone for 2 after the previous touchdown and didn't make it, so it was 21-19, and then it was 26-21. And then, of course, they got the next touchdown after that, which kind of sealed the deal as far as I was concerned. But the bottom line was just how everything happened. It was after Nick Bosa left the game. I mean, if you remember correctly, ladies and gentlemen, when Nick Bosa left the game at Iowa last year, the score was 17-all. And Ohio State ended up getting beat, 50 – I can't remember the final score to this, 52-24, whatever it was, 54-28. Yeah. 55-24, right? Yeah, whatever it was big. Yeah. This game went the opposite direction, which was very interesting. Real quickly, Nick Bosa has some type of abdominal groin strain in his hip area, his left hip area. They're not still sure as we speak today on the extent of the injury, but that's never good. Those are never good. Those never go away quickly. Any kind of situation like that where it's so painful for you even limp off the field. This isn't like taping up a weakened ankle and playing on it. This is a pretty serious thing. We'll see. Obviously, he's been ruled out for the Tulane game. I wouldn't be surprised to see the same thing go for Penn State. We'll see as it goes from there. But man, what a bummer for this guy. This guy's leading the team in tackles. And he had hoped so much to play a whole game on Saturday night because he had only got to play the first half the first 2 weeks. Lo and behold, he only got a minute and 15 seconds into the second half, and he had to be helped off the field. or he limped off, but he had to be helped on the field.
Yeah, and it's not too often that when a play is snapped, your eyes just gravitate toward the defensive end. I mean, sometimes do so. But he's a guy that I just found myself almost every snap, where's Bosa?
Yeah.
And just watching him because he's just so good.
Well, he caused the first touchdown. I mean, he strips Sean Robinson of the ball, and the ball pops out. Devon Hamilton ends up falling on it in the end zone. That's one of Ohio State's touchdowns. They, like I said a while ago, they scored 2 of their touchdowns with their defense. The offense, even though it gained 500 and buku yards, 562 or whatever it was, you think about it, I mean, without the defensive help, they don't win that game.
Question. And, the defense, I tell you a couple guys that really stuck out. Obviously, you mentioned Draymond Jones, great game. Jordan Fuller, I thought, played a terrific game. No flashy plays, but just a lot of he's making the tackle so it's a 3-yard or 4-yard gain and not a 20-yard gain. They missed him in the opener against Oregon State.
Big butt. That's 3 plays for 78, 80, and 93 yards on running plays that this defense has now given up. I don't remember that. I've been covering this team, like I said, for over 3 decades. I don't remember ever seeing that in the first 3 games of a season, or maybe for an entire season. Obviously, as I said, as I tweeted and wrote about, that was a history double there because it was the longest run from scrimmage in TCU history by Darius Anderson, and it was the longest run given up by Ohio State from scrimmage. Yeah. In Ohio State history. I mean, wow. Those get, as Greg Schiano said after the opener, those get you beat.
And there were times in that game, tell me if you agree, that the linebackers were invisible. That I'm not saying they didn't make some plays.
But the way TCU plays, that's what they try to create.
Right. And the one play, it was a brilliant little alignment because I watched it on tape.
Second 11 from the second 11 from the 7-yard line.
And they shifted the receivers all to the right. So there were really only 2 linebackers, and Malik Harrison was really the only linebacker who lined up as a linebacker because Baron Brown
stepped up into the gap.
Basically as a defensive tackle and stepped outside, so he took himself out of the play. Malik Harrison took a couple false steps, went to his right, then to his left, and that was enough for Anderson to get a crease on him. And then Isaiah Pryor didn't take a great angle, and he tried to make a shoestring tackle and didn't, and that was it. Yeah. You can't have just 2 guys having to make.
Defensive lineman got washed out on that play also.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's going to happen. I mean,
exactly.
You have to have linebackers who fill that hole. That's their purpose. And so, one was out of the play, and the other didn't make the tackle. Yeah. But you got to have more support than that.
Well, that's that old line. When you assume, you know what you do, and that's what happened on that play because. We can cast blame on it. It's already happened. You got a feeling they'll get that fixed, but that just comes down to basically trusting your eyes and staying with your initial gap responsibility before you move out and chase something that hasn't happened yet. Make sure you're dealing with what is going on right in front of you, and I'm sure they will reiterate that many times. Well, Bill, we'll be back later in the week, maybe not on video, but we'll be back later in the week to talk about the build-up to the Tulane game. I haven't seen the spread yet. Do you know what it is?
No, but I would guess it'd be in the 40 range, right?
Well, Tulane is coming off a hard-fought loss to University of Alabama Birmingham, a program that quit being a program about 3 or 4 years ago and decided to be a program again. I guess they came back seriously. Exactly.
First year, they gave Ohio State a much tougher game than anyone thought they would.
Well, this will be the first game, I think, in Ohio State history with Tulane, if I'm not mistaken. The funny thing is, one of the games I saw as a kid, Alabama, when Bear Bryant first got to Alabama the first many years, he played games around the state and with opponents just to kind of sell Alabama football. And I remember going to Ladd Memorial Stadium, that back then as Ladd Peebles, where they play the Senior Bowl. But Alabama played Tulane down there in Joe Namath's senior year, 1964. And, I know a little bit, that was back when the Green Wave was in the Southeastern Conference. My, oh my, how things have changed. But, we'll be back to talk a little bit more about the build-up to that game and other things. But until then, this is Tim May.
And Bill Rabinowitz. Thanks for watching.